April 11th, 2023 Portsmouth School Board meeting to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Susan Ross.
Yes.
Liz Barrett. Pip Clues.
Here.
Lisa Rappaport.
Here.
Ann Walker.
Here.
Margot Peabody.
Here.
Nancy Clayberg.
Here.
Hope Van Epps.
Here.
Brian French. Carrie Nolte. Here. Thank you. Carrie Nolte.
Here.
Danielle Miles.
Here.
Nick Dallin.
Here.
We all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we will begin with announcements and recognition. I think Zach and Patty have a message.
Yeah, so I wanted to thank the 35 different staff members who on March 31st presented on 33 unique topics at our Ed camps during our Professional Development Day. Topics range from things like auditory processing disorders to ChatGPT. Some of the CTE students even presented with their teachers on things like culture. Other CTE students worked with their teacher and taught faculty members basics of welding. So everybody learned something different, and we were able to harvest the knowledge and expertise of our very own folks. So it was fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Patty.
So I've got
Zach?
two. One is I just really want to thank Patty for the quality of the work that was done in the lead up to the Ed Camp Day. I had served, previously in my career, I'd served as a curriculum director and had to run days like that and had been an assistant superintendent. And I had never, Patty basically created almost like a conference website for her own in-house opportunities. Things were really skillfully done. Every T crossed, every I dotted, really well thought out, and then great coordination with a whole bunch of people. So the quality of the work, and I understand that she will push out the credit to others, but the quality of the coordination of that work and of the overseeing of that work was really, really impressive. So I just wanted to make sure publicly I had an opportunity to say that. Second, we had another recent award winner amongst the staff. So the Maine Psychological Association represents 600 psychological professionals across the state of Maine. And Amanda Buckley, who was one of our school psychologists, was recognized by the group as the new practitioner of the year for that group. And so we found out and then had the opportunity on the Professional Development Day to surprise Amanda when she was giving a presentation to folks at New Franklin with telling her that she received the award, and also folks did a great job of making sure Amanda's mom was present to have the opportunity to do that. So kudos to her. It's another great testament to the quality of the staff that we have, and great job by our staff looking out for one another and setting up that opportunity for Amanda to receive the award. So.
Hope.
I have just a few. I wanted to congratulate our PHS CTC Educator Rising chapter. At the States, they walked away with quite a few awards. They received in children's literature, first place, job interview, third place, ethical dilemma, first place, exploring support service careers, first place with the perfect score. So I just wanted to give a shout out to them. And I really wanted to also thank the music hall and the amazing anonymous donor for the $1 Million Quartet. I know a lot of people got to go see that show that would not have been able to. And it was truly amazing opportunity. And then lastly, I just wanted to give a shout out for the Lister Academy Indoor Yard and Craft Sale. That's coming up May 13th, but they're looking for donations now. So you can find out more about that at Lister Academy. So
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Carrie, did you have something?
Yes, just wanted, I guess this is the first night back for math night at New Franklin School, which had a ton of time and energy clearly spent on doing awesome activities and engaging families and It was just so wonderful and just a huge burden on those teachers to be there, 5 to 7 at night and really putting in the extra energy for our kids.
Thank you. Oh, Margot.
Following up on the announcements or the committee report I gave on March 21st, the flyers are out for the Earth Day kickoff event, which is April 21st at the Connie Bean, 4 to 7. It's got a really huge showing of people that are coming, including students that have made proposals for the city on renewable energy. So organically, it has been a full involvement of many members of our community. And then following that, the Earth Day of Action is on Saturday, the 22nd. The volunteer sign-up forms are live. They have been circulated through PTAs and PTOs, and they're also available in the April community events folder, both separately and linked to the flyers for those events. But in case you forgot, we're asking elementary school families to contribute to neighborhood and school cleanups, middle school families to contribute to cleaning up our recreational playing fields, which will involve, I'm told, a large amount of painting, so if that's up your alley. And then the community will gather at South Mill Park at 1 p.m. The mayor will be there. There's some other great things that are happening. And I just want to remind everyone, it's a full circle event that's being brought to you by Portsmouth 400, the PHS Eco Club, the Seacoast Students for Sustainability, the Blue Ribbon Sustainable Action Committee, and being endorsed by the school department. So I hope, I know it's the first day of break, but I hope we can all get a chance to be there and take action.
Margot, thank you. You've worked really hard on that.
The
Thank you
students,
so
the
much.
student, I'm following their lead.
Okay, anything else? All right, we'll move on. Acceptance of minutes, the March 28th, 2023 set of minutes. Do we have a motion to approve? Ann, second. Terry, all in favor?
Aye. We have to take roll call because he's on.
Oh, okay, we have to do a roll call, sorry. For Brian.
Pip Clues?
Here.
Yes or no? Yes, sorry.
We caught you by surprise.
Here and yes.
Lisa Rappaport?
Said yes.
Yes.
Ann Walker?
Yes.
Margot Peabody?
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg?
Yes.
Hope Van Epps?
Yes.
Brian French?
Yes.
Harry Nolte?
Yes.
Approved.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Okay, can we have a motion to go into the public comment session?
So moved.
Margot, second. Ann, all in favor? Oh, do we need to take a roll call for that? I guess we do.
Anytime you have
No?
someone. Oh, no.
All right. All right, we need a roll call, Patty.
Pip Clues?
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport?
Yes.
Ann Walker?
Yes.
Margot Peabody?
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg?
Yes.
Hope Van Epps? Brian French?
Yes.
Terry Nolte?
Yes.
Approved.
Okay, do we have anyone that would like to participate in our public comment session? No one? Do we have anyone on Zoom that wants to participate in our public comment?
No.
No. Okay. Okay, we will move on. Do we have a motion to close the public? Oh, what?
Move to table.
Move to table, oh, because we have it at the end.
We can
Okay.
bring it back at the end.
Okay, we will table that because perhaps someone will come in and want to speak. Okay, we will move on to the presentation. Hope, I guess, do you want to introduce it?
Sure. So tonight we're doing a lead presentation. Just to give a quick background, DHS came and spoke to our SWAG committee, which sits with the city, which was our water committee. And in that process last year, was that last year? Maybe a year and a half, we learned that our community and our state actually has a lot of issues with lead that are still kind of a silent issue, if you will. And so we put together a lead committee. And out of that, we have been working on looking at what other counties are doing for our own policy, as well as cleaning up lead in their communities. And so tonight we have Gal Geddens here from DHS, and a lot of her support as well. We have Kim from Portsmouth, and then Beverly is also here to answer any additional questions, although I think you'll find that Gail is a wealth of knowledge and an expert on this, and so She really drives the ship for all of us. So thank you for your time tonight and on this issue in general for our state.
We can do this here. Just as a disclaimer, we did practice several times.
Can you pull your mic down just a
Yes.
little bit, Gail? Thank you.
I'm going to share my screen to hopefully bring up some slides here. Perfect. So I'm Gail Gettins, and I'm a child development specialist by training, an early childhood educator for most of my career. And now I'm with New Hampshire's Division of Public Health Services and the Healthy Homes and Lead Poisoning Prevention Program for, I think it's almost 10 years now. And I'm here also this evening with my supervisor and our section administrator, Beverly Druin, as well.
Can you speak a little louder?
Yes, I'll get closer here. I'm trying to find a place for my spare brain, which I'm going to use in a moment. It's always good to have one. So just to level set for a moment, New Hampshire's Division of Public Health Services and the program that I'm within, the component of the program that I'm in is largely funded by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, because we're really looking at children's health and the number of children who are exposed by lead and kind of the surveillance, watching the data on that in our state. And that funding comes into the Division of Public Health Services, into the Healthy Homes and Lead Poisoning Prevention Program. And an important piece in just level setting is that every blood lead level test that's done in New Hampshire, whether it's adult, child, whether the lead level's high, low, or anything in between, all of those get reported by law into our program. So we have all that data, all the reports coming in as to where and when children are being exposed to lead and at what level. So we do produce an annual data brief, and those are in front of you. The 2021 data brief is the most recent. And then there's also, we produce regional data briefs as well, loosely based on the public health networks, and the most recent one is 2020. So there's one that's actually local data, right down to your local communities in your public health network. And we're going to talk about some of that data this evening. I start with this slide in nearly every presentation that I do, from whether I'm communicating with parents with young children to pediatric health leadership in our state. And this slide is always pretty shocking to everyone because few people have an appreciation of how significant childhood lead exposure is in our state. Between 2015 and 2019, we had 3,402 children in New Hampshire. 3,402 children. That averages to almost 650 children per year who were identified having had a blood test. Those letters EBLL stand for elevated blood lead level, and the test result was 5 micrograms per deciliter or greater. So a parent would hear from their pediatrician that your child's test was, less than 3, non-detected, they would get a number, 5 or greater. All the while that we're finding this very large number of children, we've been testing virtually no one. Fewer than 25% of our children during this block of time even had a blood lead level test, which is required by state law since 2018 at age 1 and again at age 2. 2 tests by 2. We're a small state. That is a staggering number. This 5 years was not a year, I get the question a lot, was this a year that we had a lot of exposures? And it wasn't. This is just the most recent 5-year data set I could pull, before we hit COVID and everything became a little more skewed. So just a quick, another level set. What is lead? Where does it come from? How is it used? Lead's a naturally occurring element. It's in the earth. We mine it. We take it up to the surface. And boy, once we do, we own this stuff. It is nasty. It has a half-life.
it never becomes less toxic or less poisonous. We used it in, how do we use it? I mean, we've used it in pipes. We've used it in gasoline for almost 100 years as an additive, and we used it in paint. It was an additive in residential paint up until 1978. But the issue, as I mentioned, if you think of white gooey paint, you put on buildings and churches and schools for over 100 years, is that white paint dries up and either flakes off, is disturbed during renovations or weathering. The white paint part, if you will, can dry up and disintegrate. That lead is released. And that lead today in 2023 is as toxic as when we took it out of the earth 25, 50, or 100 years ago. In New Hampshire, the way children are exposed to lead is our housing. Overwhelmingly, like 99+% of our cases. So 99+% of those 3,402 children came in contact with lead, were poisoned by lead, exposed to lead from lead paint hazards. If we take our entire state, about 55% of the housing stock, houses, individual houses, rental units, were built before 1978. So assumably could have lead hazards in them. But in some parts, some communities in New Hampshire, some parts of your city, there are communities and neighborhoods where that percentage is much, much higher. Manchester, the entire city, 75% pre-1978 housing. Rochester is 82%. Berlin is 90% pre-1978 housing. So we're one of the 13 colonies. We have all of this old housing, and much of it is still covered with lead hazards. So let's just talk about lead for a moment as this perfect poison for young children, because it is this perfect storm, and a number of variables, both in the lead itself and young children, come together to just make it the perfect poison. First, lead is sweet. It tastes good. It was used as an additive in wine and champagne and other foods over the centuries. So when children get this on their hands, their toys, or otherwise get it in their mouth, it tastes good. There's no incentive to stop putting this in your mouth. And anything, there is the incentive to keep putting it in your mouth. In addition to that, young children under the age of 6 do not have a fully functioning blood-brain barrier to keep out toxins and heavy metals. So blood-brain barrier is Mother Nature's fantastic filter. It keeps out lead, mercury, and other heavy metals. But it's not in place. It's not functioning to keep those things out of a child's brain until they're age 6. So that little guy on the screen, or any toddler running around an environment where there's lead dust from old lead paint, when they get that into their body, it goes into their bloodstream and it pumps through their brain unchecked. That little guy on the screen, his brain is a sitting duck, has absolutely no protection for the lead that he may come in contact with. It also only takes trace amounts. Kind of urban myth is that children have to eat paint chips the size of Doritos and binge eat them to become poisoned. And we now know it's just the amount of lead dust that you will not even see on your floors and your kids' toys and hands and coffee table that will poison a child. In fact, if a child eats a paint chip about the size of a dime that's in fact lead paint, ingests it, they will most likely end up at Children's in Boston in their pediatric environmental health specialty unit, one chip, for treatment just to keep them alive and lower their blood lead level. All the while, children are at the age where they're crawling on the floor, sitting on the floor, putting everything in their mouth. Their developmentally appropriate behaviors put them at great risk for coming in contact with lead. But the really nasty perfect storm piece of lead is that there are no outward signs or symptoms. That little guy on the screen could have a very high blood lead level that's going to change the trajectory of his life. But he's going to smile at you, look happy, act healthy. The only way to know is to test. Lead, I always say, is like the stealth bomber. It flies under the radar. There are no signs, there are no symptoms. If a child gets into some household poison, God forbid, they might be vomiting or unconscious or having a seizure or lethargic. You might not know what's wrong, but this child needs medical attention. Lead doesn't give you any of those signs or symptoms. You don't see the deficits, the hearing loss, the speech and language delays, much higher rates of attention deficit disorder, the significant behavior challenges, the learning disabilities. You don't see all of those issues that lead brings until those children are older and in school, and it's too late. You put all of this together, and you can see why lead is the perfect storm or the perfect poison for young children. It only takes this much lead to poison a child. When I train, this little muffin cup has sugar in it. And when I train groups in person, I give everyone a cup and I have them put the sugar on their finger. So you can really appreciate that this is what we're talking about. And if you sprinkle it on the floor, you don't even see that it's there. You could have that type of poison all over your house that you don't even see or know is there. So what happens when lead gets into a child's body? First of all, there should be no lead in the human body. Has no use, no purpose, no value. So when a child gets lead in their body, the body is literally saying, what is this stuff? Why? What am I supposed to do with it? Well, it's very similar to calcium in how it reacts. So the human body, child's body says, oh, this lead must be calcium. And what do we do with calcium? We store it in the cells of our brain and eventually into our bones. So in this picture, as you can see, is human thinking, right? Message comes along. These red arrows show you 2 places that calcium goes into the system to make it work. Well, if there's lead floating around the child's brain because they have no protection, lead goes in these 2 places into the synapses and wreaks havoc. So when a message comes along, calcium goes in that releases the neurotransmitter. The message goes across, calcium goes in again to keep the synapses together and healthy. This system runs on calcium. You put lead into it, at best it gums it up. Worse, signals are not sending at the wrong time, sending too many. And worst case, the synapses are actually killed and die off. They retract and die. Lead kills parts of children's brains. This is about the best example you can see of the long-term impact of lead. This is a slide from the Cincinnati Lead Study, an MRI scan of adults that were exposed to lead as children. And it's a composite slide of about 157 participants in the study with an average blood lead level of a little over 13. All the areas that are red, yellow, and orange are areas that were damaged by lead, less gray matter density. Especially note up top that frontal lobe, our executive function, takes a huge hit. So this is the impact of lead on a child's brain that carries with them through life. It is a permanent brain injury. So I'm going to show you a video clip with the speaker being Kim Cecil of the Cincinnati Lead Study. I think I need to get there we go. New share, here we go. Thank you.
Cincinnati Children's Hospital and the University of Cincinnati have been following children exposed to lead into adulthood. It's the longest running study of its kind in the world.
Nervous? A little bit.
Dr. Kim Cecil is an investigator for the Cincinnati Lead Study.
So lead tricks the body into thinking it's calcium. Whenever lead has got into your body, primarily through ingestion, it goes and hides where calcium should be, in the bones and in the cells of the brain. visualize a neuron, there's the neuron that's sending the signal, then another that's receiving the signal. And typically calcium is in that gap.
Calcium is essential for neurons to communicate. But when a child is exposed to lead, lead gets in that gap and blocks the flow of calcium. Without calcium, synapses get weaker and brain function suffers.
The average IQ of the Cincinnati Lead study is 86. It should be 100 in a typically developing population.
Lead can disrupt brain growth and even lead to shrinkage or volume loss in brain tissue.
I can give you kind of a hint of volume loss. You can see these ventricles look plump because there's less brain. From this analysis, I can tell you that most of that volume loss is in the frontal lobe, and that region of the brain is responsible for what makes us the most human. It controls our decision making, our ability to pay attention, our ability to plan, to make judgment, to evaluate rewards, all the things that we need in life to be successful.
Lead can cause harm wherever it ends up in the body. And lead poisoning can even be passed to the next generation.
If you're a pregnant woman exposed to lead when you were a child, that lead is stored in your bones, and when your body needs calcium for the developing fetus, it's pulling lead out of the bone instead of calcium in many cases.
That's the Cincinnati Lead study. So what do we know from the Cincinnati Lead study? I'm sure you all have gotten this message already. A little bit of lead in early childhood has a huge, large negative impact. There are two pieces from that video that every time I hear it just stick with me. The first is when she's pointing to the brains of the children that have been exposed to lead. And she says the ventricles are larger because there's less brain. She also explains that the children who've been exposed to lead have an IQ on average of about 86, where in a group of children not exposed to lead with healthy development meeting milestones, it would be about 100. In the world of IQ, that's 14 IQ points, and that's huge. That's the different, astronomical even. It's the difference between functioning well as an adult and not functioning well. Children exposed to lead almost always end up needing special support services and special education services because you've seen that MRI scan. You can appreciate the learning disabilities that they will encounter. Much higher rates of attention deficit disorder, significant behavior challenges, higher rates of school suspension and dropout, and as adults, they engage in more violent criminal activity. So you can see a little bit of lead in early childhood has this huge impact, not only for this child and their family, but for our community. There's this huge economic and social burden to our communities. Our pediatricians use the term lead's neurobehavior signature, and it's almost like an umbrella or a spectrum term for the different areas in a child's development that are negatively impacted by the lead exposure. And they all make sense, again, now that you've seen the impact on a child's brain. Oh, thank you. So significant deficits in the area of attention. They're inattentive, they're impulsive, much higher rates of attention deficit disorder and ADD. They're distractible, they can't complete tasks. The deficits in executive function, they can't control their impulses, they can't control and monitor their own behaviors and their emotions. Visual and spatial delays that boil down to symbols, that boil down to letters and numbers. This is why children exposed to lead have such a difficult time learning to read and to do math. significant behavior challenges, and few people appreciate that that is an impact of lead exposure. They can't control their emotions, antisocial behaviors, oppositional, aggression, destructive behaviors. I was in a presentation once and a mom raised her hand and kind of said, humor, well, that sounds like my 18-month-old or my 2-year-old. And I said, in fact, those behaviors describe most 2-year-olds. But the difference is 2-year-olds grow and develop out of those behaviors. When you have a child who's in kindergarten who's acting like he's 18 or she's acting like she's 18 months, or 2nd grade or 5th grade or middle school, that's what we're talking about with the impact of lead exposure. Significant speech and language delays, processing disorders, and actual hearing loss. And fine and gross motor delays. Both sides of their brain do not communicate well. They don't have the bilateral communication. So pedaling a bike or crossing a midline to write or to swing a bat is nearly impossible. So a couple of real-world examples so you can kind of think about it in terms of how it may be impacting your community. This is Ralph Spezio, and he's now retired, but he was the superintendent of schools in Rochester, New York. And he has a TED Talk on this topic, and Rochester has become the model of how to address lead exposure in their community. But he tells the story of walking down the hall during kindergarten registration, and 2 nurses are talking. And one has a stack of health forms, and the other one has health forms, and they says, this one has an elevated blood lead level too, and the other nurses, all of them coming in today have been exposed to lead. And he turned on his heels and said, what are you talking about? And he went on to realize this was a huge issue in his community. And he got the medical records for got permission to get the medical records for all the children enrolled in Rochester schools. And he found that 41% of the children coming in the door had documented elevations. They'd been poisoned by lead. And he says he knew there were many more because they were showing the symptoms and the deficits, but they just hadn't been tested, so it wasn't documented. But significantly, out of the 100% that he got the records, 41% had elevations, but that entire 41% was enrolled in special education programs. Education Week from 2019. In Flint, Michigan, the community was drinking water contaminated with lead and contaminated with a lot of other things for 18 months. This came out in 2019, 4 years after their water crisis. They've seen a 56% increase in special ed services. It says Flint schools overwhelmed by special ed needs. And this is just from 2 years ago, the New York Times. More childhood lead poisoning is a side effect of low COVID lockdowns. For almost a year, children spent more time at home than ever before. Our schools were closed, our childcare, our parks, our pools. You get exposed to lead at home. New Hampshire requires blood lead level testing at age 1 and again at age 2. It's been a state law since 2018, April of 2018, almost exactly 2 years ago. Children can be tested with a finger stick in the doctor's office using this little device, so it doesn't require a venous draw. It's almost like maybe a few more drops of blood than when you're testing your glucose levels. You get the results in 3 minutes before you even leave the office. Unfortunately, even despite having put this law into place, we were not quite getting to where we needed to be with lead level testing even prior to COVID. If you can see these numbers, we were certainly on the right trajectory, and far on the far side is 2015, so we've come a long way. But we were about 70% testing our 1-year-olds in New Hampshire and about 58% in testing our 2-year-olds. So no one's usually especially proud of those numbers. We were on the right trajectory, but we had a long way to go. And then COVID came to our world, and we've seen a 25% drop in those testing numbers since between 2019 and 2021. 5,360 fewer children were tested in New Hampshire, and we weren't in a great place to begin with. So I'm going to give you some of the data for Portsmouth. So this is directly from the 2021 statewide lead data brief. And you can see that in Portsmouth in 2021, 59% of your 1-year-olds were not tested, and 64% of your 2-year-olds were not tested. And this isn't a new or COVID issue. I pulled the numbers for Portsmouth for 2019, so before COVID came to our world. And in 2019, 36% of your 1-year-olds were not tested, and 2-year-olds, 58% were not tested. And if people, the 2-year-old test is incredibly important. Lead exposure in the United States peaks between 18 months and 2 years of age, and it makes sense because of their behaviors. If people came to you and said, Gail, we have this much money, who do we test? You test your 2-year-olds, because they have been doing all the behaviors that make them come in contact with lead. Almost 60% of your 2-year-olds were not tested. In Portsmouth, between 2017 and 2021, you had 40 children under the age of 6 living in Portsmouth that had elevated blood lead levels 3.5 micrograms per liter or higher. That 3.5 is the CDC's blood lead level reference value. Now, so that averages 8 children a year, but when your testing numbers are where you just saw them, you can appreciate that this number, as disappointing is that we have 40 children, you can imagine this number is most likely much higher. So why is this testing so important? It is the only way to know if a child is being exposed to lead. It is the only way. Otherwise, they look happy, act healthy, look healthy, but they could have elevated blood lead levels that's going to impact the rest of their lives. It also helps us identify what might be in the child's environment so that we can protect other members of the family as well. It's also the only way that we can connect that child early with the services that our program provides: nurse case management, a lead inspection for the home environment to find out where the lead is, and to also help connect them early with other services that might mitigate, or at least give them all the other opportunity that they might have, but to mitigate some of the impact of the lead exposure. It also really helps with making sure we've got the correct diagnosis, the correct understanding of why this child is having the difficulties in school, behaving the way they are in the school, so that we can make sure that we're providing the services that in a manner that's appropriate for children who've been exposed to lead. So what's on the screen is the state of New Hampshire's early childhood health assessment record. This is the health form that's to be used from birth to grade 3. And it's probably hard to see on the screen. This is on our website, but numerous organizations, including the New Hampshire chapter of AAP, the Department of Education, Head Start, WIC, our program, much of DHHS, were all involved in developing this in 2012. This is not a new form. This form has right on it 3 places to put in blood level test results. But obviously, when you go to your child's pediatrician and you get their health form for school and their immunization record, they're spinning one off that, the electronic medical records. So this form itself is rarely used. So blood level test results are often not reported to schools or not even on those forms, which can often lead to the testing not getting done. I should note that a school entry policy, the city of Claremont in 2017, even before it was state law in New Hampshire that children were tested, put in a policy, school board passed it unanimously, to require that children have both their blood level tests documented on their health forms. It's now required by law. All they're asking is that those really important tests be documented so we're protecting our kids. The last piece that I just wanted to put up, and this is my last slide before some action steps, is that there is evidence-based guidance available for special educators and those providing early intervention services on how to best work with children who are exposed to lead. most are not aware that this guidance exists. This is from the U.S. Department of Education Office of Special Education's program, Intervention Ideas for Infants, Toddlers, Children, and Youth Impacted by Lead. So action steps, we need to get all of our children in New Hampshire tested, and certainly Portsmouth has an area where they can see, what does Coach say? Area for growth in improving our testing rates. We need to educate everyone, and especially those with young children, about the impact of lead exposure. I would encourage you, like similar to Claremont, to consider putting in place entry policies that require that those tests that are required by law be documented on forms when children come into kindergarten or your preschool programs or on special ed referrals. And educate those in your school system that work with young children that are having difficulties or learning disabilities, that there is evidence-based guidance available on how to best work with children who've been exposed to lead. That is the end of my slideshow. Thank you very much. I imagine you may have a few questions.
Are there other presenters, or are you the only presenter?
I'm your only speaker.
Okay.
I'm here with my supervisor, Beverly Druin,
to your colleagues here if need be.
to help answer any questions you might have as well.
Great. Well, thank you for that.
Pleasure.
Excellent presentation. I think we have some questions. Kerry?
Yes, I have 3. Would you like me to do one?
Yeah,
or?
no, do them. You can do them all.
Okay. So I am a nurse and I work in community health, and I'm just a little confused by, I understand the state mandate for it, but the U.S. Preventive Task Force and the American Academy of Pediatrics does not recommend universal screening, that there's insufficient evidence. So I'm just having a hard time understanding
why we have that state law?
Or, I mean, I guess, one, I think it's a good thing. I think all kids should be screened, but to me, it just is another step to then make it a school policy if the evidence has been deemed to be insufficient.
The American Academy of Pediatrics does recommend universal testing if 2 things are in place. More than 25% of your housing is pre-1978. New Hampshire checks that box twice or 3 times.
Excuse me, can you get closer to the
I'm
microphone?
sorry, thank you. The American Academy of Pediatrics does recommend universal testing in communities or states where the percentage of housing pre-1978 is 25% or greater. So we check that box. And then they also recommend it if the prevalence of elevated blood lead levels is greater than 5%. Which we check that box as well. So we are a very, very high-risk state, and our numbers show that. But they recommend using those 2 criteria in developing your policy, whether it's community or statewide, and to use it for targeted outreach as well. You may be in a state, there's some areas that fit those criteria. It might be certain counties or certain communities that you may have a different policy. In Pennsylvania, Allegheny County requires it, not all parts of Pennsylvania, as an example.
And I work locally at the community health center here, and we do all capillary lead screenings, and I believe those aren't reported to the state.
No, they are reported.
Oh, they are? So the number of tests there, because my understanding in PEDS was that we only reported the positive capillary ones and then did a follow-up venous draw. I was just curious, and maybe that's why the rates are so low.
What health center are you at?
Families First.
Families First. All blood level tests are required to be reported, whatever method, finger stick or venous draw. And most of them now come in electronically. Some come in right off electronic medical records through HL7 into the building. So they all get reported.
I'll check that because I'm just not sure from our end if that's what's happening. And I guess the other struggle I'm having, and because it's always important for families to share decision making with their providers, So often we do like the risk assessment that the AAP recommends. If that risk assessment is low, we don't do screening. And so.
So let me back for folks, to clarify. So what you're saying is that you use a series of questions to ask the family to determine their risk. Like, is your house built before 1978? Have you done a number of questions? Okay. And then based upon the answers to those questions, you're making the decision whether to test or not. Okay.
And then share that decision making. You know, your child is at risk, but I recommend it for everyone, or your child's not at risk, I don't recommend it. So I guess I'm a little worried in about that. And I think from the school board side, right, because that's the clinician part of me, but on the school board side, we have vaccines for communicable diseases, right? But lead isn't that way. Obviously, I don't want water fountains in our schools to have lead. But I guess there's like a different level of requirement. I worry about, especially the families I serve who might be in transition and housing, for them at 5 years old to go back and get the test results from 1 and 2 can be very challenging depending on where they were. And so I would be curious what the barriers or the challenges are for those families that are most vulnerable, but the documentation is difficult to obtain.
You put a lot out there, Carrie.
Sorry.
I would just reiterate again that the state law in New Hampshire requires that children be tested at age 1 and again at age 2. That is the law. There's a lot of research too on why the screening questionnaires are ineffective or don't reach who we need to reach and to be tested. But all children in New Hampshire should be tested at age 1 and again at age 2. That should be the, many cases, it's just part of the rooming process with 1 and 2-year-olds.
And this information the awareness is so important, and I don't mean to minimize that, but it's just coming into this from a school perspective and trying to reconcile these two things.
Requiring it for school entry can be a policy, and then what happens next after that can be part of your policy as well. Do they have a period of time to complete the testing or get the documentation? Or are they given a reminder? Or, there would be a decision for those to make based upon what you're requiring and what barriers you think families may have in meeting that. But by requiring it, it brings this awareness. Someone is looking at these children's health forms to bring the awareness that the state law is that they should be tested at 1 and 2, and for all the important reasons we just talked about. And having that as part of a children's health record and a school record, you can see why it's so important, because if they're having trouble learning to read, and can't read to learn in 3rd grade, or they're unable to do higher math as they move along, or these significant persistent behavior problems, having this documented will help understand the picture with a particular child and then how to best help them.
Okay. Can we have someone else? Yeah. Are you finished?
I had one question.
All right. Can we ask, have other people ask a question, then we'll come back to you? Yep. Okay. I think Lisa had her hand up, Pip had her hand up, and I saw Nick, and then I saw Liz. Okay, Lisa.
Okay, I'm going to ask just one question. I might have more, but I want to let people have a chance. We were discussing the idea of lead testing around some legislation that is moving that would require schools to ask for documentation at entry to daycare and entry to school. And I think what I'm trying to understand a little better around that is, given the evidence and the recommendations around testing to be done between 12 and 24 months, when we can get the best opportunity to intervene and get the best outcomes for kids. I'm just curious what your thoughts are around what are we going to do differently for medical intervention or for educational supports if we're not catching them until 5 or 6. I think I'm just a little curious about the timing element, because I would think if I was going to from a public health perspective, try to really go hard at this, I would want to test the water, test the paint in their houses, and get them tested when they're toddlers. But it's clear we're missing a lot of people, so we need to do more to catch up. But I'm wondering, is this a catch-up measure, I guess, or is this intended to be a long-term strategy to try to get those people who got missed to still get tested when they're older? I'm just having a little trouble processing what the goal is.
When children in New Hampshire have a blood lead level of 5 micrograms per deciliter or greater, that's our public health action level. So they may have had a finger stick, it was confirmed by a venous draw, they're 5 or greater. Our services kick in when you are asking about what the interventions are. So they are eligible for nurse case management. Our nurses do home visits all over the state. They are the conduit, the connection with the medical home often, making sure that child's getting enrolled in services, developmental screening. They're enrolled in our nurse case management until either they're 6 or their blood lead level drops for so many months below 5.
So I think that's my question, is if you're getting them at 6, what are you going to do?
And then I would just, the other service that's part of that our program includes is we do a lead inspection. One of our lead investigators, our environmentalists, go out to the rental unit and they test the lead, the walls, the paint, the millwork with an XRF, a device, and we also test the water. So, and if they're not finding there, the circles get larger, childcare, grandmother's house, church basement on Sunday, until we find where the hazards are. So that testing is the only way that those children get connected to our free services to get started, to identify them early, to hopefully, change the course of where they are. So if for no other reason, that testing is incredibly important. If they're not tested, we don't identify them, and those services can't be offered to them. The City of Claremont is my other example, or you saw your numbers from 2019. So I don't have the answer for you in terms of if you were to discuss and consider a policy, whether you were putting it in for an interim to get you to a better place than you are now. Those would be your decisions.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Pip. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, because this is all really pertinent, it's helpful information to understand, and I can see that it's a real problem and a problem to get the data even. My question was actually very similar to what Lisa asked, but I have a few others, one that I think will be quick. When you mentioned the statistics that you were sharing, I think you said they were mostly from paint, but is there also a concern about the water in our housing stock?
Lead, we test the water in every single environment, any rental unit that we go into, and until, give me the date, but until relatively recently, our team was testing the water. Are we doing them in the owner-occupied still? No. But we test the water in all the rental units. That's what our regulations require. So all the children that are in rental units, when we go in and do the lead inspection, we test the water and the paint. Overwhelmingly, it is the paint. Water has, in the very few times that lead is detected in the water, it would only be a potentially contributing source. It's the paint. And it's, water, and no better place than Portsmouth, of course, sadly, with what you're managing. I mean, water and lead in water water is always the immediate assumption as the source of lead exposure. It's probably our biggest kind of paradigm shift that we have to do in explaining the lead issue in New Hampshire. It's the housing.
Yeah. Okay. And when you say that the state requires it by law, who is responsible for making sure that happens? Is it the parents or the? Think about kids who may not have regular, regular medical care.
Exactly.
So I'm curious how
there is no compliance piece. Hence, why Claremont decided to put in, their school board put in that policy to try to drive their rates. And again, this was before the state law. There isn't any compliance. There's, or gate or reminder system in place that this should be done.
And then related to what you answered for Lisa already, I'm having trouble understanding this piece as well, and I'm wondering if say a student is referred for special ed, would it make sense to test them at that point if they haven't already been tested to determine whether these issues are caused by lead exposure? And then if you found that they were, what would be different? How would their treatment in school or through special ed be any different than what they were receiving already?
Excellent question, because I'm not sure I've made this point yet. A blood lead level test measures or detects lead exposure in the past 4 to 6 months. So if I was exposed to lead as a child, it would all be in my bones at this point. But if I was tested now, and it would not be showing, if there was lead in my blood, it's from the last 4 to 6 months, not earlier. Okay. So there's no, you could certainly test a human, a child, at any time, because they may be coming in contact with lead for any reason, but it only is measuring the previous 4 to 6 months of exposure.
Okay. Thank you.
So that's why having it, those early tests, and keeping those pediatric labs, as they refer to them, on the health record as a child moves through a school system is so important, because that could be a really critical piece in understanding what's happening with a child in terms of their behaviors or their learning challenges.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Pip. Next, we have Nick.
Yeah, so just first off, thank you so much for coming in here. I think actually lead, like the actual effects of lead weren't really something that I knew a whole lot about, so I actually really appreciated the informative aspect of this. Just two quick questions though. So first off, I have no trouble believing that Portsmouth has a fairly high rate of buildings constructed before 1978. Do we know about what that rate is though? I might have missed it from the presentation.
We were looking it up, and it's a hard one because you have a lot of new construction in some areas, and then you have neighborhoods and streets where every single house was built before the Revolutionary War. So it varies in your city by different areas.
And then I think my other question would be, I understand that it's much more dangerous if a child is exposed to lead at a really early age, but do we know is it still significant if they're exposed with the levels that blood tests would measure later on, or is it kind of not really as much?
Yes, lead is a very toxic, poisonous substance. It's dangerous for all humans, including adults. And there can be a number of health issues, health impacts from lead exposure. But you do not see, you saw the brain scan. That type of damage to the brain doesn't happen when a human's exposed to lead after age 6, because I don't have my brain again. The brain's protected.
Oh.
Does that make sense? So it's under 6 that is of such great concern.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have Liz, Ann, Hope, and Brian. Liz?
Hi, thank you. I just want to apologize for being late. We had a concert at Dondero tonight. I also will say I do work for DHHS, but obviously not in your department. So I do have a few questions. The only experience that I think, I'm trying to recall when my child was younger, the experience I had, and I vaguely remember with the WIC program that there used to be devices and you would do the finger prick. And obtaining that information. And so I guess I'm wondering a little bit more about those devices and if the school could be provided devices or those devices could be utilized, and how that potentially could eliminate barriers to folks doing kindergarten admission, whether that would be an option. And I guess I'm also wondering how Claremont has played out with folks knowing that they need to have this done. Obviously, we don't want to turn anybody away from starting school or create a barrier. So I guess I'm just trying to understand have there been barriers? Have there been lots of opt-outs in Claremont? And if these devices could be utilized within the district?
Great questions. Lots of info.
Yeah.
So the device you're referring to is called the LEDCare 2. Oh, sorry. The device you're referring to is called the LEDCare 2 analyzer, and they are designed to go in the field as well. They can run on batteries. At Claremont, when they first put in the policy, at least 1 or 2 years, they brought them to back to school nights in August to do testing. I think they actually collaborated with their WIC programs or Southwestern Services, so that would be something that we could get you more information on. WIC does offer the testing to families in their clinics. They do have the LEDCare 2s. New Hampshire WIC programs are unique in being able to offer that testing. It was a project that our program was involved in 2015 in getting them the devices, and we helped them get the test kits needed because their funding, their USDA funding doesn't pay for or support that lead testing. We have to find alternate sources for that, which we've been successful to doing in New Hampshire. But it is not something that's required at WIC. They can offer it to the families. The hemoglobin is something that's required for the supplemental nutrition program, but the lead is not. But those programs do have those. So Goodwin Health, for example, Families First, they all have the LEDCare 2 machines. So there may be partners in your community that could help with outreach that way.
Okay,
I'm sorry. The part of the question too was there a lot of opt-outs in Claremont, or like how did it shake out when this rolled out? I mean, I'm sorry if I missed that portion, but
I don't have the answer.
I can speak to that.
Oh, you can. My understanding was it was passed unanimously by the school board and went into place, and they did a lot of outreach, and it did exactly what they had hoped for in their community in terms of driving testing rates. Go ahead.
Is that correct?
Yes. So we actually met with the former mayor, Charlene Lovett, and she managed a lot of initiatives along the lead drive besides just the school policy. So they actually, under her leadership, got a HUD lead hazard reduction grant. So they've seen significant increase in testing, which has helped along the lines of special ed in their district. Obviously, again, the ones that were lost are still going to have special ed needs, but those needs were able to be clearly diagnosed and not misdiagnosed as they were previously. But they've passed that policy a while ago, so now they've been able to continue building on their increased testing and lowering their special ed, as well as a lot of other initiatives in their town. So
they Charlene Levitt, who's the mayor, was just the
Yeah.
champion. She actually won a Region 1 EPA award for her work in Claremont on reducing lead hazards. But it was really community-wide with all stakeholders, increasing testing, reducing lead hazards in housing, a number of programs.
Okay, thank you. Ann, we have Ann, Hope, and Brian, and then I think we should try to sum this up, okay? Ann?
My question is, I understand that the testing when they're 1 and 2, and if they're tested now, it's not as though the lead goes away.
Correct.
But it doesn't show?
It's not in your blood. The lead circulates in your blood through your soft organs, so your brain and your kidneys, they're aroused. And then eventually, your calcium, your mom told you to drink your milk
So
for
it's
strong bones.
no longer in the blood.
It goes into your bones. It's stored in your bones.
Okay.
And that is the problem when women are pregnant. In your second trimester, you shed your calcium, Mother Nature's feature, so baby has calcium to grow bones. The problem is if the woman was exposed to lead as a child, you shed that lead directly to the fetus as well.
I see.
Much higher rate of stillbirth. The babies often die from acute toxicity, born with tumors on their kidneys and other soft organs. And then we know from the Cincinnati lead study, it's the same trajectory in terms of they end up with the same type of brain scan. So it's really important for no other reason to test our little girls, because that lead is going to store in their bones and pass on to the next generation.
And we had done testing in all the schools in terms of all the faucets and all the the, all of that, probably 5 or 10 years ago. Quite a while
Portsmouth,
ago.
yep, you do an excellent
And
job
they were
with
not
your.
finding very much,
Right.
and what they did find, they replaced.
Right, you've done an excellent job testing in your schools and remediating. Your municipal waterworks are top-notch. It's not the water.
Right.
No, it's,
So what
it's your
would be the
housing.
services that they would be able to have? What are your services?
As I mentioned, by state law, we require nurse case management. So our nurses, our RNs are in contact with the family. They go out and visit the family, do a home visit, and they are working with that family to get that child's blood level down, make sure they're getting additional testing, developmental screenings. We work hard to connect them with early intervention, early support services, with Early Head Start, with WIC. We try to get them whatever additional support services to kind of help that child's overall health and growth. Our lead inspectors go out and they test the wall, they test for the lead paint and they test the water because we want to find out where the sources of lead are so we can remove them or remove the child from them.
Fine, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Hope and then Brian.
So I just wanted to follow up on a couple of things, a couple of points. One, I do want to reiterate that we know it's not in the water. So Kenny from the schools came and presented to our water group at that time, as well as did the City of Portsmouth Water Division. And so we know it's not in the water. We know that it's more of a paint problem, which I also want to acknowledge Kim is working very hard on the city side around addressing a lot of the lead paint inspection and things such as that. So I just want to note the city is aware and taking some steps and actions. Also, I just wanted to, if I'm recalling correctly, the first time you presented to us, you shared that you had worked with several of the pediatric offices within Portsmouth and Seacoast surrounding area, and they have not been adverse to the testing. They've actually been strongly supportive of that. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Through in my tenure, I don't know exactly what year, but your pediatric associates of Hampton and Portsmouth converted, if you will, transitioned to the point of care testing, invested in the devices and put them into place. I'm not sure where else your children go, and then the health centers actually have had them for a number of years. Families First has, and Seacoast has, and Goodwin Health does. So you in fact have point of care testing, the finger stick testing, widely available in your communities.
Which is covered by insurance as well as Medicare.
Yes, it's since I think it was the 2015 law, but it's required by state law that those two tests be covered by insurance. They're routine screenings during well child check visits.
So there's no cost to the school district. I just want to point that out.
No,
and then
and
lastly,
not to the family
Yeah.
either, yes.
And I just wanted to point out, someone asked about goals. I would say that from our research and what DHS has shared, so correct me if I'm wrong, but goals would be to bring awareness, to increase testing, and to increase correcting misdiagnosis of lead poisoning, as well as decreasing the cost to school districts if you pass a policy, because as Rich, I think, so eloquently put it, it's an inherited issue that the schools are now paying for as well. So I just wanted to point some of those goals out.
Okay.
It is the awareness. It's few. There is a huge knowledge gap in general in our population, certainly amongst those with young children. And if you say lead or lead exposure, the immediate assumption is water. And not that water can't be a source or is often a source. In New Hampshire, our source is lead paint, and there's a huge knowledge gap around that.
Okay, I think we have one last board member who would like to ask a question. He's on Zoom. Brian?
Yeah, thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Good.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you for the presentation. I was actually surprised how little lead it takes. The comment, there was a couple comments about like the timing and testing, and you'd mentioned, what you're really testing is only if you've been exposed to lead 4 to 6 months, right? So I'm just wondering how a policy would work or how it worked in Claremont where, let's say half the kids don't get tested, then you say, it's mandatory to get tested. They get tested at 5. Is it really too late at that point? Or are they actually picking up on people that are, I guess, continuously being exposed to lead? Or are they, I'm just trying to understand that. It makes sense that the 1 or 2, they're crawling on the ground. They're highly likely to put things in their mouth. But it seems like past a certain age, like you said, it's in your bones, right? Are they catching any additional kids by doing this testing later? I guess that was the main question. I'm trying to understand how a policy would work too for testing later.
Excellent
I don't know if that-
The goal of the
Microphone.
Oh, thank you. The goal of a policy is really to get the testing done at 1 and 2. You're trying to be a gate, so that yes, you would test. You could request that a child go and get the test done or a test done to enter school if they haven't been tested before. But certainly still at that age, they do not have a blood-brain barrier yet. So that if they are coming in contact with lead, we want to know that at age 5. There may be less risk than that they're not crawling around the floor, but they're still playing with toys that have been on the floor. They still sit on the floor. They play in soil outside where there might be lead. There are still lead sources that the child may be coming in contact with. But the larger goal behind a school entry policy, just like you require the immunizations that are done at 6 months, that you're trying to have change the testing rates for this city so that you're getting children tested at 1, at age 2, when it's really high risk for them, and to get that documented.
And identify locations, right?
Say it again.
And it's key to help identify the locations
yes.
that are dangerous.
Absolutely.
To further fix that.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. In terms of only if we're testing them are they eligible, would we know that they would be eligible for the services, that we get them nurse case management, medical management, and we go and find where the lead is in their environment.
Okay, Carrie has one summation comment.
Before I get myself in too much trouble, I did get clarification from our clinical director that we do report all our negative capillaries before I got myself in trouble. Thank you.
Well, I was really confident that you did. I believe they even come in electronically now. You probably aren't.
Right. I think I'm thinking about the case reports when they're above 5 that we do. That has more of the history. And
all good. All good.
I have one other question, if I may.
Okay, we have can we allow someone to speak from the audience? Does the board, wait, sir, excuse me. The board has to vote to let you speak, okay? Do we want to allow Dr. Pimentina, is that correct?
No,
Rich Pimentina, I'm sorry. Do we want to allow him to speak? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes? Okay. Yes. Oh, that's okay.
Rich Pimentina from Dunlop Way. I am a member of the SWAG and also a member of this lead committee as well. So I'm not necessarily I didn't sign up on the sign-up sheet for citizens to speak. But I want to make one point, and I think it's an important point. The testing is incredibly, incredibly important. I spent 30 years in public health, a lot of it doing lead investigations, and I was the lead investigator in the last death of a child due to lead poisoning in Manchester, New Hampshire. The last case that's happened in this country, and 10 years before that was the last case, before she died. Let me tell you, the story here is important that you do and advocate for the testing, but testing is not a cure. Lead testing is what we call in public health secondary prevention. What you're doing is identifying kids who are lead poisoned at the earliest stage possible at age 1 and 2. They have already been poisoned by the time you test them if they are 5 micrograms per deciliter or above. The damage has been done. testing may prevent further damage by then investigating where they got the lead and correcting those lead hazards. But what has already been done, you cannot undo. You will have inherited that problem as a school district going forward. No matter how much testing you do, you will have inherited that problem. So what I advocate and what I plead for you to do, and it's not your role particularly, but you are inheriting a problem that is being ignored downstream. And you, as I said, you're inheriting what's being ignored downstream because we are not doing what we need to prevent children from getting lead poisoned in the first place. We are allowing children to live in homes where there are significant lead hazards, and we don't do anything about it by state law until after the child has become poisoned. You cannot go in and order a landlord to abate a lead hazard in the home until after the child has been poisoned. The canary in the coal mine. That's
Thank you,
unheard
sir.
of in public
Thank
health,
you.
and that's unheard of in what we. So I advocate for you to work with other folks at the state level, at the local level, at the national level, to change the policy so we can do primary prevention and do what we need to do to prevent kids from getting lead poison in the first place.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Appreciate you coming by. I think we're going to call this to an end. We're going to refer it to our policy committee so we can ask further questions when the policy committee brings it back to us. We appreciate the discussion tonight. It was very interesting, eye-opening for many of us, and we will study this with our policy committee headed by Margot. Liz is on the policy committee.
I just have a quick question while they're here about our responsibility to share out.
I think we'll wait. We're going to wait, Liz. We're going to wait. We're moving it on. We have to go on with our agenda, okay? So we're going to hold that question. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the superintendent's memo.
So in the report, can you just pull my agenda back open? The memo, there's a few things around. First of all, the report in its entirety includes some notifications around some retirements and resignations, which we've already discussed in non-public session. In addition, the memo from me is basically a cover sheet to the general assurances that are put out by the state of New Hampshire to school districts on an annual basis. The general assurances are basically a list. The state compiles all the different things that a school district needs to be able to tell the state that we're doing in order to be eligible for a variety of different grant programs that we're a part of. And so we go through on an annual basis and we just confirm that we are doing those things. It's a long list, and then the superintendent and the school board chair sign off on those documents, and then we submit them to the state, and that allows us to be eligible for all these different federal programs that we're a part of. So.
Okay. You don't need a motion for that.
Nope. No, I just need you to sign off on it and make sure it was on the agenda for the board.
Okay, great. Do you want to talk about the school board email summary?
Just that they're in there.
Okay.
You have the summary, and then you also have the list of overnight field trips that will be coming as well.
Okay.
And then Nathan has the financial piece.
Okay, Nathan. Oh, wait a minute. The resignations first. Do you want to go over those? You didn't.
Just
that they're there.
They're there.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yep. 2 resignations and 2 retirements.
Okay.
The financial report's pretty much the same. It's there. It looks very similar to what it did last month. I think you continue to see the variances in the same places for the same reasons, so I don't think there's any new news to call out, but certainly answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Nathan about the financial report? Okay, thank you, Nathan. We will continue Our school board meetings, everyone has a list of our school board meetings for the 2023-24 year. So everyone, please note those in your calendar. And we will take a motion to accept the 2023-24 school board meeting list. Do we have a first? Oh,
I had a question. I know it was discussed, some people wondered, did we need to have July meetings? It looks as though there's, right, and then so for the end of next year, it wouldn't be.
we don't have a July meeting,
Okay.
correct?
Well, I would move to
Yes.
approve it.
Okay. So Ann's a first. Do we have a second?
Second.
Liz, all in favor?
Roll call, because Brian's
Call.
on.
Oh, roll call, sorry.
Liz Barrett,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Ann Walker,
Yes.
Margot Peabody,
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg,
Yes.
Hope Van Epps, Brian French,
Yes.
Carrie Nolte.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Patty. Our board retreat is going to be May 11th, 4 to 7 p.m. in the school board conference room. And Margot, Zach, and I will be working on the agenda. We appreciate the suggestions we got from board members about items on the agenda. So we'll get that out to everyone in a timely manner. Okay. Under new business, we have consideration and approval of employment. Zach?
We have a singular new employment, and it's not a new employment as much as a re-employment. Abigail Clark, who's been serving in a what was initially a one-year position to cover a leave at Portsmouth Middle School, has been appointed to continue in that role. The teacher who she was covering is not returning, and the administration at PMS, with our endorsement, would like to hire Abigail to stay on long term.
Okay.
Motion to approve?
Kerry, motion to approve, second. Margot, all in favor? Oh, sorry, roll call.
Liz Barrett,
Yes.
Pip Clues,
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport,
Yes.
Ann Walker,
Yes.
Margot Peabody,
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg,
Yes.
Hope Van Epps, Brian French,
Yes.
Carrie Nolte.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Now we'll move on to the policy committee, and I'll turn it over to Margot. Great.
Just as I discussed at the last board meeting, up for a first read tonight is policy JBAB, which, just as you know, was created in 2016. And the policy committee has just updated the terminology and modified the language in some places to reflect what our students are currently using and some of the practices that we've been using in our schools quite successfully. We took our cues, as I said last week, from a wide range of administrators, a wide range of guidance, and Seacoast Outright, and they have all been really impressed with the thoughtfulness and the thinking around this policy. So it is up for a first read. The only thing I would add is that the gender definitions will be included in the policy, not as a separate sheet, but we didn't, because we had updated them. If we put them all in, it would read as though the policy had been changed more than it had been. So we put them separately so you could see how they'll look in there where it's easier to see. And
I move to approve this, and I would like to comment on having the definitions there was very, very helpful. I could read it many more times, but having it there.
Super helpful. I appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
Really helpful. So I move to approve first
Great.
reading.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Great, thanks, Carrie. Any discussion?
Yep.
Yes.
I just want to be clear, the second page is not the full portion, it's just the portion that's going under, like, so.
That's what I just said, the definitions, yeah.
But like, it would, I guess it probably would have been clearer if the whole section 2 was on there, because it almost looks like section 2 is just going to that. But so gender identity expressions includes, but may not be limited to, the following definitions, and then that's the second page.
Yep.
Okay.
Which actually will be in it, to your point. Thank you. Good clarification.
Thank you.
Hope.
So I have a laundry list. Sorry. But to just be able to fully vote on it. I want to have full understanding. But I also want to give, I don't know who all worked on this. I know sometimes the policy committee brings in, and you mentioned that. But I agree with Ann. I think the definitions were a very smart and wise choice to put in. And I think this is a tough policy, not just for our school district, but any school district to work on. And I think it's been very carefully and thoughtfully done. So
Thank you.
I wanted to just acknowledge that approach. But so can I go through, if other people have things, I'm happy to stop and come back to my list, Nancy. But in lines 52 and 53, it states that the school personnel should not disclose information that may reveal a student's gender identity and expression to others, including parents and other school personnel, unless legally required to do so, or unless the student has authorized such disclosure. I'm assuming that's in there for, for the privacy of the student, but I'm interested of, like, should there be, where it says personnel should not enclose, should the word intentional be in there? But then, of course, we have to prove intent. But the reason I ask this is because teachers have to address students in a classroom, which in and itself can disclose information. So how are we going about, protecting a teacher to be able to use appropriate language to address the student, but that's still disclosing information, if that, because
it's a fair question.
And I should also state that, like, I know that we do have students in our district, some of them come to my house, that, are the process is fluid for them, right? So that it could change from week to week or even day to day. So if they have changed and not notified their teacher or something, so I just want to know, how is that going to work in a classroom?
I would say those lines are actually, the only thing changed there was the language of gender identity and expression. The rest of that is compliant with how the policy has been since 2016 and working quite well. And that was one of the things we really checked off with all the people that are, boots on the ground, and they felt as though this read very accurate and safe to what we're currently doing.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. And then in line 54, it speaks of disclosing to parents, and I understand fully why that is in there. I'm not questioning it. I just want to understand, for a legal liability for our district, as other districts are on the line for this in our country right now, what does our current state law speak on that matter? Are we in compliance?
We're in compliance.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Good question.
And line 90 to 92, where it speaks of, I'll go back, I'm sorry, 58 to 61 area. Student support plans may be utilized to document the student support plan, by whom is that? Like, who puts that together?
So we looked at this with some other schools that are utilizing this. This isn't, that's not a legal document. That's just when a child might go to guidance. And it's a plan in place for them to have a voice to say, here are my needs, here are my wishes, how can we best support you? It's more that so that the information that they might not quite be fully capable of sharing to a large audience is shared properly to the right people.
Okay, so, because, again, I have not been part of this process, so feel free to shoot me down. But when I was reading this, in the back of my brain, I just wanted to know if there's a need for additional language regarding teachers providing advice or counsel around gender identity matters versus, you say go to guidance, but guidance can be a lot of different people, and our district is privileged enough to have trained professionals that really should be addressing this versus, no offense, but counselors, because they're not called guidance anymore, but counselors that are working more towards school schedules or doing testing, so I just want to make sure that we are protecting our teachers as well as protecting our students, that really the people that are trained around these matters are the ones that are infusing the conversations.
And that is why we added at the very end of the policy section K, lines 140 to 142.
Okay.
The professional development and training piece, so that exactly to get at what you're just discussing. That's what, that section hadn't previously been there, and we felt that was very important to add that section.
But again, that's professional development training will be provided to district personnel regarding, but just because you get a day of PD doesn't mean that you're a trained professional around these sensitive topics. And so.
No, not that they're trained, but that they're aware of the resources available, the people
okay.
to talk to, the conversations.
To how to
have.
direct the student.
Exactly.
And the process in which to do that.
The process, the conversation.
That did not come clear
Yes.
to me.
Okay. So 140, okay.
Yeah, so
that's
that
helpful.
wasn't clear there to me. So.
But I would say, to your point, there will be significant training so in order to implement this to its fullest extent,
Okay.
there will need to be layers of training targeted to different folks. General stuff for the entire staff, which would be, I think, what it's speaking to in that last line.
Okay.
But then more targeted training for folks around plan development, what that looks like, more targeted training for administrators around how to navigate kind of the logistics of those steps and what that's going to be. So this will be a significant training lift for the district.
And so that kind of leads me when you speak of training, because I was wondering, there's a lot of great language in here around teachers using appropriate, but really a student comes into contact well beyond the staff. So I'm wondering, how is that information, if a student has given authorization of like, this is how I want to be identified, how does that get to grade office? How is that getting to the front desk attendant? You know, how is that getting to other staff members? And so that can be appropriate. Because again, if it's not, and we're holding staff accountable, that leaves the staff liable for information that they don't even have to be able to follow the policy and guideline. So I just would appreciate if we can make sure we just go back through and.
I think that's a great question, and that's that area we always struggle with on what actually goes into the policy and what's actually the procedure in place. And we batted that around and felt like all of those details are that procedure, that we by having a policy, we need to support with the procedure, but the procedures that we're utilizing wouldn't show in the policy.
Okay.
But all those questions have been asked and will continue to get teased out to land on a place that's working successfully, supporting all. I think that's a great question.
Can I speak to that also? I think that's how we arrived at the idea of the gender support plan, because it would be a document that would help share that information with the students' permission, of course, to everybody that they come in contact with, all their teachers and all their, the staff members, so that those people did have the information that they needed to respectfully address the student or, notice them walking in a bathroom and not say something.
Right.
So the policy committee, while we can't require that we use those support plans, we have recommended it to the administration that would work very well with this policy.
I didn't know if that would somehow, if legally that can go, like, again, if even the front desk staff, when they're looking up a student, if that can be legally, because we have in here that their name can't legally be changed in the system, right, without court. So, I can see that for their guidance or grade office because they're coming in regular contact, but there are people that come into especially at the high school level. I guess I'm
That's the
thinking
most
about the high
challenging
school.
place.
It's the most
The logistics
challenging
are the most
because
challenging at
it's
the high
much
school.
easier, I think, in our smaller buildings.
Yep.
But I just, again, want to make sure that we're not using language that's holding people accountable if they don't have the information.
Yep.
But that is also, on the flip side, respecting the student. So,
Right. Yep. Gotcha.
So I had 3 more, if anyone else wants to jump in.
taking
Otherwise, I'll
Danielle
jump.
has her hand up. Let's
I
have.
just wanted to sort of piggyback on that topic.
Okay.
I know we're a much smaller school, but I know in regards to the procedural part of when a student goes to any trusted individual, and we just had this whole training, all the staff, it was around mental health discussions and how to have those open discussions and what your role is. So staff are undergoing those really helpful PD to really know your role and know how to advise them to the right place. But in our school, I know this has been for years, what we do is when a child goes to any trusted adults, that does become part of, can we build the trust with that student to find the right team, and then that team develops that plan? How does the child want it communicated? Do you want an email sent to all staff? That way it's just there, but it's really guided by the child. And I hear what you're saying is let's cover our bases and make sure that policy supports procedure, but it's one of these things that I think the procedure and the best practices is sort of guiding how to back it up.
And I would just say, building on that, like we looked at some examples of some student support plans, and I think the fundamental thing that ran through all of them was the theme of exactly what you're saying, Danielle, which is the student is driving what they want,
And
what they are comfortable with, and what do you need.
We've seen it all. I mean, we've had students say, "I want an announcement, and I want to tell the whole student
don't
body
say
at the
anything
same
at
time."
all. Or this these two people only, and that's,
And that
I think
has
that's-
been honored
yeah.
to the T each time. We'll throw you a party, or we won't say another word.
Thank you, Danielle. That was helpful. Hope, why don't you finish?
Okay, so in 84 to 85, around the sex or gender segregation with activities, I'm just wondering how this section, since every effort, and I appreciate the language that it allows some flow and it's not so rigid, but every effort should be made to avoid sex or gender segregation and extracurricular, and how this plays out with our current district policies, like with state policy as well as with sports policies. Because I honestly don't know our sports policy around like transgenders players and such, so I'm just
So we did talk about that, and we do have a section on that.
It is someplace.
I know it talks
Thank
specifically
you.
further down as bound sports.
So that's the sports, which is NHIA mandates,
Right.
and we're completely in compliance with that. The section that you're referring to, which is the section D, sex or gender segregated activities. We spent a lot of time talking about this because this does seem to be the new landscape that we're really facing the most. We want to be super thoughtful about. And when we wrote the policy in 2016, this really hadn't bubbled to the surface yet. And so I would say the way this is written is in compliance with how we are currently doing things.
And how are we currently doing things?
What this is talking about in terms of field trips and things of that nature, that we need to have options available to all students. So all students have access to the same experience in a way that they feel safe and they feel comfortable. And the language is meant to reflect that. And where possible, being mindful of if an activity doesn't need to be segregated, let's raise awareness to that. What used to be segregated activities based on sex at birth, we've sort of moved well past that. And so then it was talking about in the situations where we still have been traditionally using segregation, which really came up more in housing for field trips. We needed to create language that gave the opportunity for all students to find a place on that trip where they felt comfortable and could access the experience.
Okay, so help me understand from a policy perspective how we're doing that, again, there's not legal liability to us. And it seems like there's always legal liability, right? Because I understand
It's always a
that
sliding
on
scale.
every side of the fence, someone can come and sue a school district nowadays. But I'm just trying to understand, like with the overnight trips, for example. So if we have in the policy that parents are not being notified, right? If a student chooses not to notify their parent, but then they may be placed in an overnight hotel situation, and this could be parents on either side of that, right? For parents of that student or parents of another student, which I think they also are not notified, right, by privacy laws, as far as I understand. So how does that comply for us, that we are protected from, I guess?
We're talking about all students, so I don't know what you mean when you say that student versus the other student. I mean, we're trying to make sure that everyone feels like they have a place to participate in these.
When I say that student, I'm talking about what Margot was talking about, a student that has come and said, I would like only 2 people to have this information right now about my sexual identity. That's what I'm saying, Pip. I'm not saying from a segregated standpoint, right? Like the student that we're trying to protect everyone's privacy. I understand that, but there may be particular situations that we're taking additional accommodations to protect a student's identity at their request. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's okay. That's what I'm trying to.
And I don't know how.
Can I answer the question to
how it relates to the field trip, but go ahead. Maybe if I just listen.
I can answer as far as the legal liability, I guess. I mean, legal liability, you have a policy. As long as people are following the policy, you know, if somebody's going outside the policy, then they take on personal liability. As long as our staff and are following the policy that we have in place, I don't know that there's necessarily any legal liability unless somebody is intentionally doing a criminal act within the confines of whatever's going on in the hotel room or whatever. So as long as the staff are following the policy, I have no doubt that our children are safe. So I don't know that there's necessarily any legal liability surrounding anything unless somebody's doing a criminal act in the process.
Thanks, Liz.
Lisa,
So
are you finished, Hope?
I'd like to answer Hope's question, if I may, and then if I don't, you can certainly. I think that we were thinking about several other school districts around the country that have evolved their policies. I mean, this originated back in 2016, very much around sports participation, access to locker rooms. And since that time, I think our understanding of what students may need has evolved a lot. And so part of this was to take some of the approach to locker rooms and to expand it to overnight trips. So we're not necessarily mandating in the policy any specific housing arrangement. So there might be a kid who needs privacy, who might say, actually, I need a single room to feel safe on this trip. And then there could be a question of, is there a cost to the family? Or if this is a low-income student, is there a cost to the Opportunity Fund? So it's not necessarily mandating that kids get thrown together in a way where anyone would be uncomfortable. That's not the intention. The intention is just that if a child has had a conversation where they say, for me to feel included on this trip, this is what I might need to feel comfortable. We're trying to give our administrators an ability to say we do have a policy that gives us flexibility in working with that student to try to make an accommodation so that they can participate. Because the way the trips are done right now, they are often you room with boys or you room with girls, and
that doesn't always work.
And that doesn't always work perfectly for everybody in every situation. So I don't think this is intended to mandate that a student should have to have any type of rooming situation for any student that would necessarily make them uncomfortable. But it's to give students who might need accommodation based on their gender identity and expression and an opportunity to basically discuss that and see if they can work out something on a case-by-case basis. Does that make sense?
That helps a lot, Lisa. So I guess that's a good example, because I'm wondering, so if it's a situation where that student, you say, well, we would maybe go to the family and say, is it a cost to the family? Well, if we can't go to the family because that we're protecting the privacy for that child, then is our policy as a district that does come out of our Opportunity Fund, or that there are funds made available by our district? Do you understand what I'm saying?
No, I do.
That's
and
why
I
I'm
think,
just trying to understand
yeah.
how are we managing, because if we're going to put something in writing, then we need to make sure as a district that we're backing that up, because we've already put in another section of this that we're protecting all privacy rights of the student. So that there can be costs, there can be other, I mean, it's endless. So that's what I'm trying to understand, is if we are talking about those things, or, with this policy, does it, need to state that the district, that is something the district would be looking at? I don't know. Again, I haven't been working on it.
I would say just broadly, anytime we pass a policy, then as a board passes a policy, then there are very often budgetary considerations connected with any policy. So,
And those are procedures, really.
and the procedures will help inform what budgetary
Right.
needs there are
Right.
as part of that.
Okay, and then the last question I had was in line 112 to 113. Any alternative arrangement should be provided in a way that protects the student's ability to keep their or transgender status, gender identity expression confidential. Again, this read to me a little bit more around the language that you were talking about, Margot, earlier, of like if we're trying to protect a student's privacy, even all privacy, versus speaking of all students. So maybe it's just how I interpret it, but instead of the ability of full privacy, let me back that up because I'm probably not articulating.
Is the
myself.
word, so is it a verbiage choice that's
the
throwing it
original
off?
policy, right?
Right, that line was, the only thing we changed in that line was we took out transgender status and replaced with gender identity and expression. So is it the abilities, can you help me understand the term that's
But
challenging
actually,
you?
well, I guess you could look at that and say that what we're protecting the student's ability to keep not necessarily their gender identity confidential, but the correlation, lack of correlation between their gender identity and their sex given at birth. I mean, is that really, that's what
Right.
that's the privacy we're trying to maintain,
Right.
as opposed to, we want their gender identity as they see it to be expressed. So we're not trying to keep their
No.
so I think maybe that's a language issue. I think that
see.
is maybe not in our intent.
I didn't, yeah,
I don't know.
I'm getting now.
It didn't
I'm
quite
sorry.
come
Took
across
me
to
a
me
second.
of like all students.
I
full
hear, I
privacy.
didn't, I was slow to understand that.
Yeah.
Okay. That can be wordsmithed.
Okay.
Yeah, I know what the intent is. and
Because I think
see
there were times where we did substitute. I think we went through and substituted out transgender status or something like transgender out for gender identity and expression.
Yep.
I think this is one where the nuance of the sentence maybe ended up with a different intent than we a
Because
different
we're
outcome
really
than we
wanting to
intended.
protect all students' full privacy, right?
Yeah.
Like, even if,
Yeah, and to that end, on line 114, the word transgender was supposed to have been
Yeah.
taken out, but
Yeah,
that
that was a
a
miss.
mistake.
Yeah.
So that will be gone.
because it read to me like we were talking more about one section of
which we're trying not to do
students
with this
there,
policy.
and I
Yeah.
was like, this does not read to me that we're trying to protect
And-
all students.
And I think that was,
And all
really
privacy.
purposeful work to try to take this from, we're talking about one sliver of students, and instead, how do we universalize the principles for all students? And I think
Right.
that was there was a lot of work to try to rework it in that way. So it's a good point in terms of some adjustments we can make.
Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, those are helpful.
Yes, Hope, thank you.
Yeah, not directly related. I noticed it said, and this is from the original, in line 55.
Wait, 35 or 55?
55, school personnel shall not disclose information or reveal students' gender identity unless the student has authorized such disclosure. Is that like a formal authorization process? Is there like a form someone fills out, or is it?
No, they can just say, I'm fine
Verbally.
with, you can share with anyone.
Right.
Yep, good
No,
question.
Thank you.
Any other?
I have a question. The H, interscholastic competitive sports teams.
Yep.
I read the, if I understood it correctly, the NHIAA policy, and according to what I read, it's up to the individual school board. Is that correct?
I didn't read it that way.
I'm in,
That's how I read
in
it.
their section right now. I think,
I think uniforms were an option for the school board, but I think the participation is set by NHIAA, if I remember it correctly.
All right, can I get some clarification on that for our next, this is the first reading, so for the second reading, I would like clarification on that. I have to admit, I didn't scrutinize it, but.
So your local, this is so this is the section I think that you're probably speaking to, and where school boards have some play in this.
Yes.
So students who wish, and this is not the beginning of this section, it's section 21 of the NHIAA handbook. Students who wish to participate on an NHIAA gender-specific sport team that is different from the gender identity listed on the student's current school records are advised to address the gender identification issue with the local school district well in advance of the deadline for athletic eligibility determinations for the current sports season. Students should not be permitted to participate in practices or to try out for gender-specific sport teams that are different from their publicly identified gender identity at that time, or to try out simultaneously for NHIAA sports teams of both genders. So there's some NHIAA is saying this is what we're going to do, but we also are within what we're going to do, we're giving individual school districts some wiggle room in terms of how they interpret that particular piece.
What was that section?
Oh, wait. Can I finish, please?
What was that section, though, that...
It's line 123 and 124.
No, I said the section that...
Section 21 of the
It's in
NHIAA.
It's in NHIAA article.
Not in our
Although I'm looking
policy,
at
I'm
21,
asking...
no,
It is in the
this might
policy
be-
right here. It refers to it on line 123.
I know, but that's
All
not
right,
the section
Liz,
he's
no,
reading.
I'll apologize because what I'm looking at is the 21-22 handbook. So some of that notice might be a little off. And I also want to check to verify that what I just read to you is not changed in the 22-23 NHIAA.
What section, though, did you just read?
21. Last section in the 21-22 handbook.
I'm having some difficulty with this. I think the entire policy is perfect, with a few edits that people had. This particular H, interscholastic competitive sports teams, I'm having some difficulty with. I would also like to know, in addition to what the current NHIAA policy says, what other school districts in our area have decided to do about this. I guess I want us to be competitive in our sports life, and if other teams have an advantage over our team or vice versa, I think we need to research that a little bit more before we include this particular part of the policy.
That is the old language, though, just to be clear.
The NHIAA?
No,
Okay.
the language in the
Section
policy
H.
has been there
Just
since
refer,
2016.
basically says when it comes to interscholastic sports, we'll follow NHIAA.
We didn't change that.
We didn't change that.
Okay, well, I'll look it up, and I'm hoping
but
everybody
I think
else
we're
will
happy
look
to bring
it
it back.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
fine.
that would be great. Yes, Hope.
Can I just follow up on that? Because I'm trying to be very thoughtful in hearing from our staff in all the policy meetings we had last year about make policies that we can't always procedurally enforce. So I'm wondering when it comes to sports, I know with my kids playing sports, I have to sign stuff. I get information. I see stuff. I have to submit forms for them. I have to sign off on disciplinary and code of conduct. So if we're trying to abide by the other parts of this policy of protecting a privacy, but yet we're putting in this same policy, so I do wonder if it needs to be pulled out and be separate, that a child can play sport according to how they're identifying. Those two things could conflict.
I think that what Zach read, though, was it specifically identifies their publicly identified gender.
Yes.
So
They're publicly identified.
right. So
But-
we'd
so-
only
but
be speaking about kids who had disclosed their gender publicly.
But
they
when
can't
we,
go to the
but
games.
again, if they have disclosed with the support plan,
Mm-hmm.
they have made it public in their eyes to
Yeah.
pieces of the public. So how do you define public?
Well, I think
So
that
I
in that
think-
case, the student would, in order to play on a team of a particular gender, they would have to accept the fact that that gender was going, that gender identity was going to be exposed to their parents. And they would understand that they have to sign documents.
Okay, so I'm just asking,
But again, I think it's
is
the
that
student.
clear in our policies to our students? Is
Yeah.
that clear procedurally to our students? I don't know that, but
No,
I
that
just
has
see
been-
that this can be a place that
I think
Functions.
I think it's safely in keeping with, it's clear in the policy and safely in keeping with maintaining that from the previous policy. But I think Pip's point is exactly correct in that situation where, it's hard to create a policy that covers, that protects all and covers all and reaches all exactly where they need
Right.
it. And so that's the challenge of a policy like this. But I think the language is written exactly so that there is a range. And for those that aren't needing the policy necessarily in terms of privacy, but more in terms of awareness and education, it's covered and it's encompassed. And for those that are seeking the awareness and the education while also maintaining the right for privacy, it's there and it's covered. So it's nuanced, but I do think the language is safe and clear. But definitely good questions to bring back after first reading.
Because to me, it seems like if that's the case, again, maybe I'm wrong, but right now, the way our policies are written, public really means how they're showing up in our databases.
Oh, I didn't interpret it that way. I literally thought it was how they walk into a public space.
Well, again, I would think that, but if that can vary to the degree of a support plan.
Right.
To an individual.
Well, and I think that the support plan was something that we definitely really felt strongly about. That is not necessarily, it's something that is happening informally right now. And it's like, how do we create a structure that brings those types of conversations, depending on where a student is. We have a thoughtful conversation where we're considering where are those points where how the student is thinking about their own identity, intersecting with different parts of the mechanism of school, and then working together as a team to be like, well, how are we going to navigate this?
How's it going to play out?
How's that going to play out? And so now that kind of informally happens, and I think the desire is to create a bit of a more formal process about how we think about it.
Nudge it a little.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it would make a lot of sense to have sports be an item in that plan.
In the plan.
So that question
Yep.
was answered right up front for
And,
everybody.
and if they were
to be on the
planning
same
on
page.
playing, they would need to go advocate for their needs well in advance, and who's the person they advocate to. So I think it's creating clearness on both sides of the line.
Right.
And as Zach said, nudging the practice.
Right.
So we have consistency.
Right.
And clearness.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I do believe we are a district right now, and I hope in the future we would remain a district, that it's not just a black and white policy, that there's conversations.
Yep.
That's giving it legs.
Okay.
Thank you.
If possible, if it's possible to find out what other school districts are doing.
Yeah, we can do that in between
immediate
first and
area
second.
for
Yep.
teams that we play, just so that we can.
We'll ask.
Can I? I'm sorry. I just want to have one comment.
Yes.
To your point, Nancy, about you. I had talked about advantages, I guess, in folks coming onto sports teams. I just want to be clear that in other countries. In Olympic sports and Olympic running, for example, there's rules that prohibit female athletes who are born female from participating because of high testosterone levels. So I personally have high testosterone levels. I have PCOS, which creates that to some extent. Obviously, you probably can't tell by how I look, but maybe it makes me more athletic. I don't know, but I just want to rid the stereotype that some other sex or gender or how somebody identifies is going to create an advantage. I know what the perception is, but I just want to rid some of these stereotypes because I think there could be children that are playing that vary in different degrees. So I'm a little bit hesitant to sort of endorse this idea that anybody would have an advantage over another if somebody were playing one way or the other, but I do understand, the political connotations around that and how that's been expressed in media. And I appreciate you wanting to have that understanding and wanting to get more clarity around it, but I do want to rid some of the idea that there would be some sort of unfair advantage, because I think that everybody is different in their abilities and, in their hormones and everything else that could provide some sort of advantage, so much so that women in the Olympics are not allowed to run due to their high testosterone levels. So I just want to throw that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Okay, do we have a motion on the floor?
We already had
Motion
first
and
and
second.
second, so.
Okay, I guess, are we ready to vote? Is there any more discussion? Okay, remember, this is the first reading, it comes back for a second reading, and that's when it finally gets adopted.
And we need a roll call vote.
Yes, we need a roll call vote. Thank you
Liz
for your-
Barrett?
Yes.
Pip Clues?
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport?
Yes.
Ann Walker?
Yes.
Margot Peabody?
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg?
Yes.
Hope Van Epps?
Yes.
Brian French?
Yes.
Carrie Nolte?
Yes.
Passes.
Thank you, Patty. Okay, we'll move on to our ad hoc legislative committee with Lisa Rappaport.
Okay. So I know that it's getting kind of late. I always feel like my brain is starting to fade, but I did include in the minutes and in the agenda, I did include in the agenda packet a link to the minutes from our last committee meeting, a link to the bill tracker that the committee has been using all session to try to keep an eye on bills that may be of interest to the board in line with the legislative principles that we approved for this session. And as often happens in New Hampshire and in many state legislatures, the vast majority of bills that you try to track in January disappear by this point in the session. So there are several areas that were of interest to this board that, despite our best efforts to find good bills to recommend that we consider for positions, are just no longer really alive in the legislature. So we did not find anything around school safety to recommend, or school construction, which were two areas that I know for many people on the board were of big concern. If we continue the committee, we can continue to keep an eye on that. There were 3 bills in particular that the committee discussed at our last meeting to consider whether we wanted to make a recommendation to the board. I am going to take them out of order a little bit, just so that we can focus at the end on the one that I'd like you to consider for action tonight. One of the bills is HB 342, which it deals with lead and would require daycare centers and schools to ask for documentation of lead testing. And the committee was generally supportive of this idea in theory, but felt that it would make more sense for the board to hear this presentation tonight and then to come back at our next board meeting on May 9th, potentially with a recommendation. I know that the committee generally is set up so that we would ask the board at one meeting to consider whether to take a position and then only come back to the board after that if the board voted by at least 7 votes to take a position, to then at a subsequent meeting ask the board to consider written testimony. Because of the timing of the legislative session and where we're at, if it is acceptable to the board on May 9th, I may come back to the board with a recommendation for a position on this bill. And if that passes by at least 7 votes, I may then also ask the board at that time to consider brief written testimony. Certainly people can vote no if they feel that that's too rushed, but just in the interest of trying to make our position known at a point when it might still be able to influence the process, that is something the committee would like to consider at our May 9th meeting. And you can see some of the questions that we had in the minutes. I think I asked our main question in the committee when our presenters were here, so I'm not going to stall there too much. I would also say that our committee discussed, SB 272, which is the Parents' Bill of Rights. A very similar bill was unanimously opposed by this board last year. Our committee felt that given our conversation around our policy JBAB, that we didn't necessarily want to have these conversations going on twice, and in 2 different directions, because there's a lot of issues in the legislation that are not issues in our school district policy. So we just felt as a committee that it made a lot more sense for our district at this time to focus on our policy. So we don't have a recommendation for the board on that. And then there is one bill that I hope is in keeping with our legislative principles around supporting access to healthy and affordable school meals. HB 572, which would expand eligibility for free meals in our schools to 300% of the federal poverty level from where it is currently, which is at 200% of the federal poverty level. I meant to be kind to everybody and Google what is that currently for a family of 4, and I got a little busy and didn't do that, but that is widely available information. And the simple explanation of this bill is that the money would come from the state. So certainly our tax dollars do go into the state fund that would ultimately be then used to provide additional free meals. And we don't know exactly how many families in Portsmouth would benefit from that, but there would certainly be some. And it also, I think, is in keeping with the broad public good of supporting expanded access to free meals, especially after the pandemic when so many families have had financial struggles. So I'm certainly happy to answer questions. The motion that the committee would like to ask the board to consider on that bill is to take a position of support.
Do we have a motion? Kerry?
I think Did Kerry have a question?
I had a question.
Well, let's get the motion on the floor and then we'll open to discussion.
Okay.
Do we have a motion?
I'll move
Pip,
to support that.
Second? Hope. Okay, Kerry, go ahead.
The budget note on this is what concerns me. So the budget note has $0, which if state funds were going to it,
Correct.
It would have that. But so it says the Department of Education states this bill would increase costs at the local level for providing an increased number of meals at no cost, and at the state level for staffing and administration of the program, as there would be need to process new eligibility.
Do you know what date that is, Kerry? Because this was amended pretty recently.
It's the amended version.
Because the amended version that I have, and this is dated March 9th, so there may have been an amendment that I missed.
March 22nd.
Okay, so when we made a vote on the committee, this was in the March 9th version, and at that time it said that it shall be funded by disbursements from the Department of Education to the school districts made from funds appropriated from the Education Trust Fund. So has that changed since then? I mean, things can change, so I don't want to discount that possibility.
It's just, I see that. I see what you're talking about.
Because I don't see where I don't have the budget note in front of me, but I know in the original version of the bill, the funding was not addressed. So when it's first introduced, there wasn't this language around where the money would come from. And as a committee, we had a question about who would pay for it. And would Nathan want to know how much it was going to cost? And that was why it took us a while to bring it to the board.
So most likely what I think then happened was that the budget note at the bottom is from the original bill.
Okay.
They didn't redo the budget note.
That does happen, but I can't say for sure that that's what happened in this case.
Right. I mean, I guess, like it just the fun, I don't know. I guess the question is if it's in the governor's budget or not, because it seems like that's the appropriation. Anyway, I don't know how much it would cost. I mean, I love this initiative. I would love to do this, but also if we're making $100,000 decision for the town, that's it. So I don't know what.
You say with Gather?
Is it possible to get an answer to that?
Well, I mean, in the text of the bill, the answer is what I've read.
Okay.
If there's another budget note floating around, or there certainly are negotiations at the end. Like if we're making a position on a bill, we're making it with the text in front of us at the time that we vote. It could still be amended. And the governor's budget could still say something else. And what we would be doing if we make a position is we'd be taking the position based on the text in front of us. And we can certainly, if we wish to at a later time, if they change it in some way where it's no longer acceptable to us, we could, if we wanted to, consider writing to the governor if we want, or putting in a different position statement. But at this time, it's moved out of its house of origin, and this was the language that was taken up.
Yeah. That all makes sense to me. Thank you for addressing that. And I think, as you said, that is within this. I think I would be fine with putting support based on that discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Kerry. Thank you, Lisa. Any other? Oh, Zach has a question.
I'm going to show my ignorance, Nathan. So in Vermont, we there was a mechanism within the legislature, the Joint Fiscal Office would basically crunch the numbers and then turn back around to legislators were the primary constituency for them. What are the fiscal outcomes in a variety of, is there an equivalent in New Hampshire?
There is.
Okay.
Question.
There is, the guy that we count on most at the Department of Ed came from that office.
Okay.
Legislative service, on the legislative side. This, to be fair, this looks to me like a punt, like somebody either in the initial version of the bill that came through from legislative services, they didn't. I go back and read it as amended right now online, which is I think what Carrie's looking at as well. The language is still there that says it'll be appropriated from the Education Trust Fund and the governor is authorized to draw a warrant to satisfy this, et cetera. So it's not really that this is suggesting that the extra free and reduced would come at local cost. It's saying Uncle Sam is funding through reimbursements only what Uncle Sam is funding at the federal level. And if we allow these, they must be categorized separately, and those funds would flow directly from the state itself through the trust fund. So I think, unfortunately, I think that fiscal note at the tail end just has not been updated.
And we
That's not news.
And we did talk about the fact that it's hard to then monetize
Yeah.
what is the trickle-down impact back to a taxpayer in Portsmouth based on our own population, which may be, it's possible we could have, and we do in some communities, have lower levels of free and reduced lunch students that will qualify at this level. But we weren't able to, we don't, that's why I think it's hard for us to do that financial analysis. But I thought that the committee as a whole felt that, and Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, that whatever difference on the margins that might be present in terms of that type of impact, that the overall positive impact of the entire state system of education was worthy of considering written testimony from the board to support the position. So.
Okay.
I don't know if that's.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to take the vote.
Yes, please.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do we know what it's less than or equal to 300% of the federal poverty guidelines? Do we know?
Yeah, I just had that number.
I can Google
give
it.
to you.
I'm sorry,
It's
Liz.
30,000 for a family of 4.
That's
So it's
100%.
90.
But
So it's
300%
90,000 would be the threshold. So
90,000?
90 and under
For family of 4.
for a family of 4.
Okay.
Okay. Shall we have a roll call vote, please?
Do I need to read the motion that's in the
Oh.
packet?
Yes.
Oh, sure. Yes. Why don't you?
Just for fun. If I can find it now. Sorry.
I had it. I just
It's on the
I can
agenda.
read it. I know.
Yeah.
Did we read it?
Yes, you can read it.
So we are asking for the,
Actually, I'm sorry. I have one more question before, because I'm reading some of this text too.
Okay.
I'm sorry. So this is for 300% of the guidelines. Do we know? So right now, the way I'm reading it is saying that the Department of Ed will provide reimbursement to districts to ensure students eligible for reduced price meals are offered breakfast and lunch at no cost to the student. Currently, it's only breakfast that's covered. So do we know that, so if it's 300% of the federal guidelines, are these kids still going to be considered, would they still be considered free and reduced under 300%? Do we know, Zach? Is that where we're at right now for free and reduced? I guess I'm just curious if there's any portion of this that's going to end up on the city side of having to pay
no.
Based on that 300% threshold.
No, I mean, I guess as I read the bill right now, and I hadn't seen it in this iteration, but as I skim it now, I don't think there's any risk that we'd be talking about these folks being charged locally. I don't even think there's a risk that we would be charged as a district locally. What I can't say for sure, remember that federal free and reduced numbers are at the heart of calculations of Title I eligibility and allocation. I don't know that this is going to replace the free and reduced number at the federal level for federal purposes or not. Maybe that's all local here in the state. The state gets to measure that and judge it, and then as a result, it would simply have a ripple that would impact how dollars that come through the state get distributed between our districts, right? So maybe it would benefit us in
It
the
could.
free and reduced.
I think,
like
but then
that.
it's, I mean, if I read this right, the thing to try to, the ultimate thing to try to figure out, which I think would not be the hundreds of thousands of dollars conversation. I think it's, but we're talking, what is the backfill of the educational trust fund as a result of the expansion of stuff, and then how do you backtrack that money that needs to then go to fill the educational trust fund back to Portsmouth? I don't think that we fully have that answer to, but we might be able to be in a position to give you a better way to think about it by the next time we all come back together.
Okay. Kerry, one last comment.
I'm just wondering if you'd be willing to add within that letter, sort of add support for this, but also that having that expense fall on the district would be different. That may prohibit us from supporting it, because likely what I worry is going to happen is that now that this has been modified, the budget note is going to get changed, and then another amendment can happen. So at least if we register our support and put that caveat.
So there's 2 steps to this. So the first vote before the board is whether to agree to take a position of support. And then at the next committee meeting, we would draft proposed written statement to come back to the board for approval at our next meeting. So we could certainly, in that statement, consider, and if you have language that you'd like to add, certainly feel free to email it.
Sounds good.
Because I'd much rather bring it back so that it matches what you're asking. Our next meeting, I made a mistake in the minutes. Our next meeting is actually the 17th. I was a little sleepy when I typed this and forgot to add that one. But that would be the date when we would try to draft a written statement so that we can bring it back to the board for consideration on May 9th if this motion passes. Does that make sense? Okay.
Okay. All right, any other comments? Let's have the roll call vote, please, Patty.
Liz Barrett.
Yes.
Pip Clues.
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport.
Yes.
Ann Walker.
Yes.
Margot Peabody.
Yes.
Nancy Kleberg.
Yes.
Hope Van Epps.
Yes.
Brian French.
Yes.
Carrie Nolte.
Yes.
You have your supermajority of 7.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa, for all your hard work on this. You've certainly been dedicated to it from the beginning. Thank you.
So
Great
for that
committee notes.
written statement, what we will be trying to do at our next committee meeting is to draft a written statement, which would then go in the agenda packet for the May 9th meeting for this bill that we just voted on. And depending on how the committee finishes the discussion on the lead bill, we may also have a motion to consider on that and draft language to consider to go along with that position. So if anyone has any thoughts they'd like to share on a potential statement around lead that they want to send to me before the committee meeting, you can do that. But we would only vote on a written statement for the lead bill after we vote separately on whether to take a position on that bill at the next meeting.
Can I just comment?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I just wanted to say, I did send everyone the link to the most recent amended version of HB 342. You should have received that, which is the lead bill.
Does it change from what's in here, Hope? Because I think I updated this like March 27th.
No.
Okay.
What I sent you was
Cool.
So, and then I just, for what it's worth, the lead committee does fully support this bill, and they have nearly a century of health experience. So just for whatever, just putting that out there. So where it stands.
Thank you, Hope. Okay, we're finished. Are there any other committee reports? I think Ann has a committee report.
No, I've just been attending the Library Board of Trustees, and actually our last meeting was canceled. So
What about the citywide neighborhood committee that you
I forgot
represented
about
the
that,
school
yes,
board?
Ward 4, and basically, they didn't have many questions. There was a write-up in the paper about the turf field, which was very, very accurate, and I was glad I'd seen that, because that was the same day as the Ward 4 meeting. Most of the questions were about sidewalks in the John Darrow area on McKinley and Harding.
Well, thank you for attending on behalf of the school
Pleasure.
board. Any other reports? No? Susan, how is everything at SAU 50?
Really lovely. We just met with the teachers at the 2 schools, and they're just so enthusiastic and excited and energized. It's really an exciting time for us. That's great.
Very good. Well, thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you
It's
very
always
much
wonderful
for
to have a
having
SAU 50 representative here. Thank you. And Nick, do you have anything to report on the students at Portsmouth High School or the students in general?
Well, we did have the talent show. So that was really successful. I'm not sure if I reported on this last time. I can't actually remember if we had a meeting since it happened. But regardless, I helped run the raffle. We had a bunch of good fundraisers. We had, I think, about 200 people in attendance. The crowd was amazing. It was a really good time in general, I would say.
Oh, good. That's great. Thank you.
We're hoping to continue this on as an annual tradition from now on. I think it's got legs.
And Danielle, everything is fine at Lister Academy.
We are doing wonderful. We've got kids out in the field doing some local estuary research, and we've got another group of kids who are elvishly crafting and creating goodies for our yard sale. This year we're going to do a craft and yard sale, and we're recycling and upcycling furniture. So trying to teach some hands-on skills and applicable skills that they can hopefully apply to their first apartments.
Awesome.
So, but I'm just going to do one more plug. If anybody has furniture in any shape or form that they would like to donate, we would love to have it.
Okay.
And just drop it off at the Lister School.
Yes, or we can do pickups as well. That's part of our kids are looking for extra hours to earn their end of the year. We've got a little budgeting system going, and so they're putting in work hours and volunteer hours in exchange for an end of the year field trip. So they need to come pick up your stuff.
And if we could do those drop-offs and pickups, calling the school and then dropping it off, so I don't want 15 couches pile up overnight.
Stacked up in the yard.
Right, exactly. I don't want Kenny. I don't want Kenny calling me saying, "What's up with all these couches out behind Lister?"
Fair question. We actually have had one of those box storage donate us for free a box storage unit for this purpose, because every year we pack in one of our rooms, we give up some of our teaching space, and then we pack it into the cafeteria, then we pack it back into that room, eventually to be hauled off if not sold. And so I don't know what strings got pulled, but I'm already happy.
In their Zach's office, if it fills up.
Thank you, Danielle.
Or maybe that is Zach's office.
Okay, I guess we don't have any other public comment out there. We thought we would put it at the end of the agenda in case we missed someone. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Brian, you're in favor, correct?
Yes.
Good night, Brian.
Hi, Brian.
He hung around long enough.